And welcome back. So we're back on our 2009 TRX today, and one item I wanted to tackle because we're in the process of going back and chasing down some more electrical gremlins is an issue that pops up saying that there is a problem or a light out on the passenger front of the vehicle. So what you can see here on the driver's side, that went ahead and pulled the headlight assembly out. Now, as you saw probably in previous clips, this has got the newer style halogen projector. This is not HID in this setup, but you can see that we've got a halogen projector and low beam, standard high beam bulb, and then typically this will be LED on the turn signal and LED on the front. I'm sorry, LED marker light and an LED turn signal here on the front. And this is a newer style headlight assembly from Ram. And on the newer styles, they come out to a single connector that you can see here. So the bulbs that you can service are behind this kind of weatherproof cover that you have to remove to get to the high beam, low beam, so on and so forth. So in order to adapt these to an older Ram, you need some type of adapter harness, because on an older Ram, what happens is you have individual connectors for these. You have this connector here, which I believe is your turn signal marker light for the side marker and the front marker you saw down at the bottom. And I believe this one is your low beam, high beam connector. Now, if I remember correctly, I believe it's a shared ground, and then one leg is your low beam, the other leg is your high beam, and they just share the same ground, if I remember correctly. And let's see here. You can also see you got something kind of hanging off here in this generic unopenable potted box. What this is a resistive load, and it allows you to take the newer type of LED assemblies and put them on an older style Ram without throwing a error on the dash about having a bad bulb or a burnt out bulb. What these do, and they're called several different things. Some places call them CAN bus eliminators. Some places call them CAN bus error eliminators. Error eliminators is a bit more correct, in my opinion, than saying CAN bus eliminators. CAN bus eliminators, if you eliminated the CAN bus on any newer type vehicle, the entire vehicle wouldn't do anything or behave very erratically. What this does is that this supplies a resistive load. So when the body control module goes to check out the status of what it thinks are your standard incandescent lights, aka lights with a filament, something that should have a set resistance when you check across it. LEDs aren't going to look like a standard incandescent bulb, so it causes the body control module to throw a fault. This gets around that. What this does, again, this simulates a resistive load on the circuit, so you don't get the bulb out indicator messages. Now, so you can see that the individual who owned this truck that put these upgraded lights in did at least get the adapter harness, so kudos to them for doing that. And you can see that somebody has spliced back in, it looks like a repaired factory connector for the low and high beam. And I'm just gonna unravel this bit of tape here when we get started, just to kind of look and see how these connections are made. I just want to make sure they're not twisted together like the wiring we saw underneath the driver's dash there. But I'm going to take the opportunity to upgrade this adapter set, because on the passenger side, if you remember when we did the front brakes, there's some wires that are hanging there, and the passenger side is also the side that's complaining there's a bulb out. If you look at the wiring on this little, again, resistive load, or simulated incandescent light, looks awful familiar. I think this is the wiring that somebody has pulled apart on the passenger side there, which is why it thinks there's a bulb out. Again, because it's not seeing the load or the resistive load that it expects to see for a valid incandescent light, aka light bulb, so it's throwing a code. So you know me though, rather than just patch together what's in there, we're going to take the opportunity to upgrade things a little bit. What you see here is a very similar type kit. Well, I shouldn't say very similar, but same style type kit. It's got your single connector, but then it has your provisions for your turn signal / headlight connections. We've also got a power connection. And you'll see a box here. Everything nice and neatly wraps up and runs into. This is that same resistive type load. You can tell it's got a nice big beefy heat sink on it. It's potted in place. And again, what this is going to do is give that check that the body control module is looking for, the ability to see what it thinks is still an incandescent bulb setup. Now, this kit also contains kind of an upgraded feature. You'll see that we got a fuse tap here. It was included with the kit. Actually, I got two of them. I got an extra. I was given a spare one, which is kind of cool. But you'll see the tap also contains kind of a factory plug on it. Plugs into here. Now, this leg here, which comes in this bundle here. This is actually a separate bundle to show you this. I just got it taken out the tie wrap and unwound so I can see how much length I got to deal with. You'll see it connects both driver and passenger sides, and what this does is via this connection here, which is a fused block, feeds power into both of these module setups for driver and passenger side. But it also has another cool provision. If in your fuse box you can locate a fuse that comes on, preferably key ignition only, type 12 volts, you can tap into this with this included tap. Take this plug it into this part of the harness here, and it gives you the ability to use a section of those headlights as daytime running lights. So if you would like to have that feature, so anytime the truck is running, that you have a daytime running light feature, that's when you would use this included fuse tap and plug it into this part of the harness here. Now, I may not do that on this particular truck here because there really isn't a need for it. I mean, if I can conveniently find a provision in the fuse box, I'll go ahead and plug it in so we can try it out, and I'll just leave it up to the owner that's going to receive this truck, or the donee that's going to receive this truck, I should say. Leave it up to them as to whether it's a feature they want to leave enabled or not. But what I'm going to do, again, like you can see here, and where we got these from was Retro Shop. And I'll show you his part number here. Now this is for a Gen 3? Gen 4? Gen 4? I think this is Gen 4. I think it's Gen 4. Maybe Gen 3. I'd have to, don't quote me on that, I have to look. But that's your part number there. Jeremy over at Retro Shop is where I get all of my aftermarket lighting for my Ram vehicles. As you can see here, and again, he's not sponsored. I'm saying this of my own fruition. I'll put a link in the description to his YouTube channel as well as his website, because on his YouTube channel he covers a lot of these kit installs in various videos. And if you're looking for a set of custom headlights that maybe are painted, the insides of them are painted a custom color, or you want ones that can RGB change colors and things of that nature. And if you remember on our 2500 back there, not only do I have a set of HID projectors that were retrofitted into a 2016, again from Jeremy, with a little bit different of a wiring kit, but if in the last series of our videos, we put in a set of 5th gen LED OEM tails into a 2600, again via a very similar type adapter harness that adapted into the trailer wiring, as well as came with one of these resistor banks. If you go back and look at the previous video, again allowing it to run an LED set of tails without throwing that, you know, burnt out light bulb error message. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take apart that bit of tape that you see there and verify that there isn't something in there that needs to be cleaned up. If it looks good, then we'll leave it as is and we'll just rewrap it, and then we'll get to work on getting this installed. This is just going to go, and I'll show you in the fuse box, but there is there's a little stud that I like to take advantage of that the wiring harness bolts down to in the TIPM for 12 volt positive. That's usually where I like to kind of just jump this into. And then I'm going to go ahead and start taking this one off. We'll get this one on and we'll find a good spot to kind of wrap this in place and get it cinched down, and then I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So I went ahead and de-wrapped the repair to the headlight connector that somebody made here. I'm actually liking this. This is nice. They used butt splices. I can feel them inside of the heat shrink, and maybe you can see this, but they also use the type of heat shrink that's got the adhesive in it, so it shoots out that sealant as you heat it up and shrink it down. So I'm happy with this. I'm not gonna touch or alter this. That's good in my opinion. I'm just gonna rewrap that with some fresh Scotch tape, Super 88 in this case. And one thing I did notice when I unwrapped the headlight connector, because they had this all wrapped up, is that this is not locking into that connector like it's supposed to now. It may be something to do with this adapter harness not locking in correctly, because it does have the lock tab. It does have the release button, so as long as this is a factory connector, which it appears to be, as long as this was made correctly, it should have fit, but it wasn't locking in, and they just wrapped a bunch of tape around it to hold it in place. So it'd be interesting to see if Jeremy's connector will clip into place, and if it doesn't clip into place, then I know something is wrong with this connector, because I've never had a problem with Jeremy's wiring adapters before. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and finish getting this out, and we're going to take this, which supplies power to our harness, and we're going to start getting this routed. Again, one leg of it goes here. You can see it's got a shorter leg, and it's got a much longer section, which that goes over to the passenger side. So I think what I'll do is what I've done before, and just kind of run that across and follow this factory harness you see up underneath the upper radiator support rail. Just kind of zip tie that along that to get over to the passenger side. But let me get this wiring harness situated, and what I'm going to do is to show it to you here on this TIPM. And yes, this should be a TIPM because it's an older Dodge. I believe the newer Chrysler products, they've gotten away from this being a TIPM, and it's just a standard fuse box now. There we go. What I usually like to do is right there, just take advantage of the bolt that bolts in to the fuse box in or TIPM, whichever one you got, because you can see that eyelet is perfectly sized to do that. I'll just tap my positive 12 there, because again, this line does have a fuse in it. Let me open this up so you can see the size of the fuse. Let's see, that is a 15 amp. So I'll tap there. And again, this blue one is if you want to run this as daytime running lights. And I believe, if I remember correctly, when you do the daytime running lights, it's the bottom row of light here that would normally function as a turn signal, that it will turn that on and keep it on Again, if I remember correctly, again, don't quote me on that. Let's see. Again, we can always, we can always turn it on and try it, and that'll definitively tell us what's going on. Let's see. So we'll do that. We'll do that. Again, I'll think about that. I'm not quite sure on the daytime running light piece just yet. So we got to get that situated. We'll get the rest of this old plug and harness off of here, and we'll look to getting to our new harness in place. But let me go ahead and take care of routing some of this wiring, and I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So just first of all, let me clarify something. I'm a ding dong. And by that I mean I thought this was an extra one. It's not. What this is, and you'll see this, see the two different fuse sizes? You've got, and I believe this is what they consider a micro, and this is what they consider a mini. If that's incorrect, I'll put the correct text on the screen. And it just depends on what style and what vintage truck you have. Again, my apologies, my correction. I thought this was an extra. It is an extra, but it's there for a reason, just based on what style of fuses your particular RAM has. Now, in Jeremy's instructions, he said to easily just use the fuse out of the fuse box that dealt with the sunroof. Well, as lo and behold, even on this model, M19, you're probably not going to be able to see that, but it is a 5 amp ignition R accessory sunroof / wind soft switch illumination. So it's some kind of, if you had a sunroof, or some kind of, looks like switch illumination fuse. So what we're going to do, since we know that is an ignition one, lines up with our instructions. I pulled the 5 amp fuse out. I'm going to put it into this holder here on the bottom, and then we're going to plug this tap back into that spot. So give me 1 minute here. Let me get this fuse into this holder. There we go. And it's going to go into the open spot. Get that down in there. Give me a minute. I need both my hands here. I'm hitting that fuse there, so I gotta finagle this a little bit. Let me get this fuse seated, and I'll bring you back. Okay, sorry about that. So it's hard to hold the camera and push this in place. That's a brand new fuse holder, so that's fairly tight. Really good connection. So you can see that we've got our normal fuse there. This is our fuse tap fuse at the top, and then we're just going to take this. Should be able to get it up into here, push that into place, and there we go. So we've got our fuse tap in, got our original factory fuse back in, and of course what's going to power our daytime running lights here on the top. And then what I usually like to do is just to kind of keep that out of the elements. There's more than enough slop here to run a wiring up and then still get the cover to fit. So what I'll do is I'll just take this, join it together, plug it into this harness, and I'll show you when I get this done, and just kind of tuck this in, possibly maybe on the side here, up against these relays or between these relays, again, just kind of getting it up in here and just kind of keeping it out of the way of stuff. But we've got our tap in here again. This tap is for the daytime running light functionality, and this is the normal power tap, again, with its own separate fuse that powers up the adapter harnesses, or provides power to the adapter harnesses themselves. And again, this is the daytime running light fuse tap you would need if you've got the newer mini versions of these, because again, just to show you that, you can see that that one is much smaller in comparison to one of those. Not too much smaller, but you can see it there on that one. You can see kind of where the small one ends and the side of the other one. And again, it's for the daytime running light feature if you've got these smaller micro type fuses. Okay, let me continue to work on this, and then I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So to show you what we've done thus far, I found out there was pretty convenient little, enough space actually in here between the TIPM and the case, plastic case the TIPM sets in, just to kind of push that fuse holder. Just to show this to you, just to kind of take this and just kind of set it down in here. Made a nice little cubby for it. I can just take our excess blue wire. Our blue wire has been routed, as you can see, up through here, which will allow the top cover to sit. And of course, that's where we made our connection into the harness. That's our positive we spoke about earlier. Secured it with a tie wrap here, just so that this doesn't go anywhere. I'll probably put one more tie wrap on this side, to be honest with you. Probably tie wrapping this wiring to this harness here, just to give it that last bit of extra security. And you can see the passenger side of this power tap is just zip tied along the wiring harness that goes underneath, again, like we spoke about earlier, underneath this top radiator brace. And that's the driver side of it popping out. That will plug into the new adapter set. And of course, just to show you that I did go through and rewrap these after looking at these connections. So we have a very similar story on the passenger side. It looks like they also changed out the connector for the headlights. Interesting. So it may be whatever connector they had on here before wasn't compatible with this particular wiring harness, so they changed them out. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to unwrap this one and inspect it and just verify that it looks okay. And it looks like they did the same thing here. So they look like they also had that same fitment issue where the connectors weren't locking together. So we'll have to see if that still continues to be an issue. But remember, and there they are. Remember earlier when we were changing those brakes, you see how that's been all pulled apart, drug, snatched, like it got caught up into something and just shredded. Probably the tire, because somebody removed the fender liner and didn't put it back in. So without that resistive load on there, that would definitely cause it to throw a light out condition on the passenger side. Also, I'm taking the headlights out. These were on the tops, which are fine. This is what should be there for a factory mounting location. The bottom one should also be one of these exact same bolts. What they had in there was like a sheet metal type screw. Presumably, I guess what had happened, they lost the other two bolts. So I'm going to go grab some bolts off our donor ram, just so we can put these back in with the appropriate hardware. I'll also have to steal one of these off our donor ram. And this is just the Headlight Locking Tab. And if you've ever dealt with a Dodge before, in order to get these lenses out, you reach in through the, I'll open up the door here, you reach in through the fender well, pop this door open, this little plastic door open, which is part of the fender liner, get in here and basically push down on this, it's either push down or push up. Let me go look at the passenger one, because it's easier to look at one that isn't broken to pieces to explain it. Okay, you see that? You see how that's a bigger opening there? So when you get the headlight assembly in, you grab this little tang right here, you pull it down, and you see that's now a narrower opening. That locks in to this little nub on the head, on the housing of the headlight. And you can see the other side there, somebody broke it. Now it's not critical. I've seen plenty of these where nobody comes back behind themselves and really even locks these back in place. It does have this little ball mount here, ball and socket type mount that it'll push into, which is right here. And usually from what I've seen, that's sufficient enough to hold it. Yeah, but these are really supposed to be, you know, pulled down like that to lock the back of the headlight in place. And then you push up on them to release it. We'll just have to replace the one on the other side because it's been, you know, as you saw, it's been smashed. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this. We're going to fish this through so we can get it to come out here on the passenger side. I'm going to inspect this wiring. If it looks just like it did on the other side, I'll just rewrap all this and then I'll bring you back when we're ready to make connections. Talk to you in a bit. So So real quick, just want to show this to you. I got the tape off of this. It pulled right off, and you can see that's just bare twisted copper. So just like we found in other spots of this truck, I'm going to take the rest of this off, and we're going to solder this up like we've done before. And just to show you, same soldering utility we use this for, same solder, same soldering station. It's not anything new, but I did get this new from Amazon. I'll link this in the description. This is the type of heat shrink that has that adhesive in it, that sealant in it, and I'll be using that when I go to make these connections here, again, just to help kind of seal this up. So with that being said, let me get to work on that, because again, I want to repair this. That can't stay, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm going to get to work on this, and I'll bring you back. Thank you much. So just to show you what I'm doing here, it's the same process as before. You see we've got them tinned them individually. We got them joined together. That connection's strong. It's not going to go anywhere. The heat shrink with the sealant in it, I ordered stuff that was quite large. Ordered the wrong kit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double heat shrink it. I'm going to use a standard piece of heat shrink that you see right here, the red one in color. It's going to go over the connection. Going to shrink that down, and then we'll shrink a piece of the bigger stuff with the sealant in it over top of that, and that should give us a nice seal off, secure connection. So I'm going to continue to just again do the same thing to remaining 3, and then we'll get this old adapter harness off of here and start getting the newer ones on. So I'll bring you back in a bit. Bye. So just to show you here, we've got all 3 of our wires resoldered at this point. We're just going through and put the heat shrink on. So I wanted to show you that's the inner layer of heat shrink, and then we're taking a section of this bigger outer layer, which has the adhesive in it, and putting it over top like that, and just doing a second shrinking. So and you can see some of that, hopefully you can see that, but you can see some of the sealant right there coming out of that top piece of shrink wrap, or I should say heat shrink. Yeah, so like I said, probably a little bit of an overkill, but it should do a very nice job of keeping those wires secure and clean, because it is going to the headlight circuit, and the headlight circuits can pull a number of amps, especially the incandescent, the older style incandescent ones, and they do. So it's definitely not a section that you want hand twisted wire. So that being said, I'm going to get this final piece of heat shrink on, and I'll bring it back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So you got you back on the driver's side. You see that we have our new module secured to the side of our frame. That should keep it out of the way of the headlight when the headlight goes back in. And yes, I just did use standard tie wraps on here. You can use a self-tapping screw if you like to go through the center on there. It's entirely up to you. If you're comfortable with it, go for it. I just used one of the supplied tie wraps that came with it, and plus added another one. If I think this might be a problem, I don't think that little module is going to get hot enough to do anything to those tie wraps. Tie wraps will handle some pretty good amount of heat. At least the automotive grade ones will, before there's any kind of issue. Now if I think this will be an issue, and I will monitor this once we have the electrical system and the engine in, stuff back to a safe enough spot to reattach some power, we'll power the headlights up, and I'll just come in here and monitor this. And if I think this is going to be an issue, I'll just replace this with a giant clamp, one of those giant hose clamps, and just clamp it on that way. Again, it's just attached to the frame rail to help the frame rail dissipate heat, if any, and again, just kind of here on the side just to kind of keep it out of the way of anything else. So I'm getting ready to make the electrical connections, and also what came inside the kit is a tube of dielectric grease, and yes, I'm going to use it on my electrical connections, knowing full well that talking about using dielectric grease in a video is again almost as bad as either doing a torquing video, talking about religion, talking about politics, or talking about welding. And I know what you're going to say. Dielectric in and of its name means inhibiting. electricity, or at least that's what I'm sure everyone will start blasting me in the comments for. But don't worry, I've used it before. I'm going to smear a little bit on the face of the connectors as they're plugged in, again, just to kind of help keep grime and dirt and any moisture out of these connectors. I've done it for years, especially on incandescent lights. When the kind you pop out of a socket, I'll usually put some dielectric grease in the socket before putting the light back in, and I've never had an issue with it. Now, where I wouldn't use it is for very, very small pinned connections, like maybe the connectors going to an ECU or an engine control unit, because some of those connectors get really, really small and really, really fine, and having dielectric grease in there, and I have seen this where it could cause a connection problem by having schmutz in there. But I'm going to use it in this case, and if there is an issue with it, shall let you know. So what we need to do is make our connections, and the pigtail off the adapter harness that comes out of the plug, so that's our singular plug there to go in our headlight assembly. This one, according to our diagram here, this one goes to our truck headlights, and from removing the old harness, we know that's our truck headlight connector, so this connector will get made there. And then this connector for our turn signal, which is our turn signals, is this connector here. We'll make this connection, and then finally this is our power feed slash daytime running light feed, which will get plugged into this connection here, and of course this one goes in the back of the main headlight itself. So let me make these connections and I'll bring you back. Thank you much. And welcome back. So this connection's been made, clicked in, nice and solid, good to go. The one for our turn signal, however, has the same problem. And it's not a problem with the connector on the adapter harness, it's a problem with the connections within here. It looks like they broke a piece of retaining plastic on each one of these connectors. So, you know, the proper thing to do would be to get a replacement connector and repair all of this. But the connector itself is good. They just broke the locking mechanism, and I don't know, it's just going to be a pain in the rear because you can't get these connectors from Mopar directly. You actually have to get aftermarket ones like this one right here, which should work fine. But I'll be honest with you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to join these two connectors together, and yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a rigging, but I'm just going to put a piece, I'm just going to cross some tie wraps across each side of that to hold that in place while I go get and order some replacement turn signal connectors. As you can see what happens, that should lock in place right about there, and it's not. So it does fit, but it looks like somebody broke the internals on this, and they did it to both sides. So interesting. Okay, anyway, I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to bring you back, and yeah, it's not going to be the ideal repair, but it'll get it to work for now. Talk to you in a bit. Okay, welcome. So I'm just going to show you what I did here. Yeah, it's not the greatest thing in the world, but I just fed a tie wrap through this connector, looped it around here, as you can see, to the back side of these connectors, and just cinched it down. So it's not going to go anywhere. It's definitely not going to come apart. And like I said, I'll research, seeing if I can get these from Napa and replace them. If I can, great, I'll replace them. If not, I will leave that like that. It's fine. It's not going to come apart. It's not going to cause any issues. It's definitely not going to go anywhere. We've got this, again, this was our headlight connection that's made. Power connection, our harness is made. I just took the excess, as you can see, looped it up, tie wrapped it out of here, tie wrapped it in here, just trying to keep anything out of the way from the back of the connector, and also trying to be mindful that as you're driving down the road and this stuff's bouncing around, that it doesn't rub up against where it's not supposed to. So we're ready to put our headlight back in on this side. We can just take our spare wiring here and just kind of push it back inside this cubby hole once we get our headlight assembly in there. But what I need to do first is go steal this piece off our donor ram, and 2 bolts as well, and
and we'll just replace these pieces on the red one when we start working on it. I'm gonna go grab those pieces and I'll bring it back in a bit. Thank you much. Okay, welcome back. We've retrieved our donor part, a couple of our donor parts. This is the retaining tab that locks the back of the headlight in. We got 2 more of these bolts, and in case you're curious, these bolts, at least on the two 1500s that I have here, the 2009 and the 2012, for holding the headlights down, are the same bolts, the same 2 corner bolts. Let's see if I can show you here. We got a lot of the right here. Yep, this is this corner, and that corner that the grill mounts to uses the same coarse bolt that the headlights use. So we just stole these 2, because remember the grill is held in by 4 bolts. You got the coarse ones in the corners, you've got 2 threaded sheet metal ones here and here. So for the time being, we just took that off the top of the grill mount on the red one, and don't worry, we will replace it when we get around to playing with the red one. To get this tab out, you see that little clip there at the end? You just depress it, and that will allow you to pull it out of this holder here. So when you're putting it back in, the little L piece goes down until the back, and all you got to do is put it through the slots, get it lined up, push it through. There's clicks, that tab will hold it, and there you go. We now got the correct piece here. That is the unlocked position. So when we put the headlight in, we'll reach in, pull that tab down, and at least secure the back of it. Like I said, these aren't critical. I've seen a lot of these where individuals just don't relock them. I mean, it'll hold itself by this little ball and socket joint down here at the bottom, but you know, they're there, might as well use them. We're just going to go ahead and get the rest to get this plugged into our headlight, get our headlight nestled back in here, and we'll move on to the other side, and I'll bring you back in a bit. Bye. And welcome back. So we discovered why they had, if you remember, one of these sheet metal screws for a top bolt up here. Now if you look at this one, it isn't quite centered anymore, but it is in there and it is holding. What we had to do, and what they did, was they broke this bolt off into this piece of kind of heavy duty plastic. I'm not quite sure what plastic this is, but this is just a plastic retainer right here. It's actually just a plastic insert, much like it is on the bottom of here. That's why these bolts are coarse threaded like this, because you're just threading in the plastic, so it really doesn't take much to tighten them. How you break a bolt off like this into plastic, I don't know, unless somebody, you know, glued it in place when they went to put it in and couldn't take it back out again. So what we had to do was, because we had enough slop in it, I tried to dig out what was left of the old bolt. I couldn't do it. Tried and tried. So we ended up just taking a drill bit and drilling right off to the left of where the bolt hole would normally be, the thread in the plastic, and was able to get it to thread in. So it's in. It's got the proper fasteners on it at this time. I'm happy. The bottom one, they also cracked the base where the bolt goes in. So what we did, because it wouldn't tighten up, but I don't know if you've ever done this trick before, took a little piece of tie wrap, cut off the end of it, took about that long of a piece, put it down the bolt hole, and then threaded the bolt in. So that way this tie wrap would take up a little bit of that space and give it to something to grab onto and hold. And again, that only worked in this case because you've got to remember, look at that coarse thread. It's just threading in the plastic. So, and again, it works, it's in, it's not going anywhere. And I'm hoping there's still enough light out here to show you this. Let's see, is that going to be too dark? Are you going to be able to see that? You should be able to see. Yeah, hold on, I'm gonna have to get a shop light. Let me get a shop light and I'll bring you back and show you this. Okay, so here we go. Sorry, we're losing light out here. Let's try to do through a shop light. So you can see the that white locking tab. It's locked into the headlight at this point, and generally what you would just do is take and pull down on that tab and that'll lock it in. A lot of times what I found useful to do is to push inward
on the headlight and then pull that tab down. But you should feel that tab grab the back of that headlight, letting you know that it's secure. So what I'm going to do, well, I can't really show this to you because I need like 3 arms in order to do this. Let's see here. So I'm going to get the light out of the way so you kind of lose what we're looking at, and see if it's back far enough to at least engage. Yeah, it needs to be pushed back a little bit. I feel it hitting just on the inside of the lip there. So what I'm going to do, again, just to explain it to you, is I'm going to push on this side of the headlight. I'm going to push in just a little bit, and that should give it what it needs in order to get that to latch. And then I'll bring you back and show you what it looks like. Thank you much. Okay, hopefully you can see that there. Get some light in on the shop light here. Hopefully you can see where that white tab is now engaged into that little peg that was stuck on the back of the headlight. And there you go. So that's the little door inside the fender well. And yes, this door's seen better days. It looked like it probably ate the tire at one point. Don't worry, I'll probably get another. I'll either get another fender well in and replace that fender well with a new one, or pull one off our donor ram. But let me get back over here to the passenger side and get this one buttoned up before we lose the rest of our daylight, and I'll bring you back and show you this passenger side one installed. Talk to you in a bit. Okay, welcome back. You can see we got our passenger side headlight assembly attached in. There's our adapter, all of our wiring. Same thing we did on the other side. We just kind of tie wrapped it to the side of this frame rail to keep it out of the way. Again, I will look at this when we get power to the truck and make sure that it doesn't get too hot. And if it does, I'll find, like I said, I'll just get a big old metal clamp and clamp that to that. But we've got our wiring harness here, just kind of tucked away out of the side. Everything's just tie wrapped together just to kind of keep it bundled out of the way. We had the same problem with this connector for the turn signal we did on the other side. We did the same fix where we just threaded the tie wrap through the connector and cinched it in place, so it's not going to come apart. So what we're going to do, we're going to get this thing popped in there, and then I'll bring you back. Thank you much. So found out the reason why they had a wood screw on the bottom, because they've stripped this one out from its original thread. So what we're going to do is, again, since this is just coarse thread threading in the plastic, we're just going to cut off a little piece of tie wrap, drop it down in there in the hole. That'll help take up some of the space, and it should allow us to tighten our bolt up. Yeah, it's a little bit of a kind of rigging it to get it to go, but again, this is the plastic insert. That's why you don't crank down on this, otherwise exactly that'll happen. But let me get this done and I'll bring you back. Thank you much. Okay, so we got a camera operator with us. What I'm going to do is put a piece of tie wrap in here and cut it flush. And what we should be able to do is now thread this in, because again, it's a rather coarse threaded bolt. That tie wrap should take up a little bit of that void where it's been stripped and allow us to get in here and tighten this up. Now, what it did on me a couple of times off camera was that it grabbed that piece of tie wrap at some point, because that bolt is so coarsely threaded, and actually fed it up out of the hole instead of staying in place. All right, perfect. Okay, so you can see that bit, it tightened up. Yeah, it came out a little bit, but it did tighten for us on this time. So again, just a little bit of a trick. It's, you know, a little bit of a hack, and really, you can kind of see the top one is almost as bad. So we're going to do our same trick on that one, because I don't want this hardware vibrating loose. And unfortunately, this kind of stuff happens, especially since this is just threading in the plastic. And who knows how many times somebody has had these headlights off and back on, but this is the kind of stuff that happens when you crank on them too much. Now, I'm not saying that somebody
cranked on it and stripped it. It could just be because of age. There we go. See that? That's now nice and tight, and it's not going to go anywhere. Really, the true way to fix this would be you'd have to replace this whole plastic piece here in order to get a fresh insert back. So I mean, you could do it if you wanted to. You could remove this whole plastic side, that whole plastic side, and replace this assembly, but you know, for a couple of pieces of tie wrap, as you can see, that's not going to go anywhere. Okay, so just wanted to follow up on this. This blue wire wasn't fitting well coming over through here. I figured there'd be enough slack in the door. So you can see what I've done here. Just cut a small V. Don't worry, it's not going to bother anything. The lid will still fit over it. It's not going to allow anything to get in there that shouldn't get in there. Let's see here. So we can now put our blue wire into our little groove. We should be able to now take our box lid. There we go. There we go. Perfect. Yep. So that is now in there. It's now secure. It's no longer being pinched. And we should be good. And with that, I will wrap up this particular video and go ahead and tell you that, or please ask you that if you have not subscribed already, please consider doing so. We recently just broke the 1,000 subscription mark, but as with most things, you know, the more the merrier. The more individuals that we can get subscribed, the more our channel gets recommended, gets more views, and allows us to do more and more of these type projects. So with that being said, I'll let you go, and I'll bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.